There comes a time in every seeker's life when you have to make the ultimate decision to return or to keep on living, to keep training or to bring back the blood, the sweat, the tears of the Comic Book Dojo. Welcome back, white belts. Prepare yourself. Today is a momentous occasion. Today, you will bear witness to the ultimate, to the penultimate, to the greatest, the most undisputed, undeniable, indomitable comic book force in video casting comic book review history. For today, you step into the Comic Book Dojo as we prepare to discuss the greatest, the ultimate wrestling comic of all time. The ultimate, no, wait, that's the wrong one. The ultimate, yeah, it's Daniel Warren Johnson's Do a Powerbomb. Today in the Comic Book Dojo. Let's do it! Shall we? Welcome back, white belts. Today we're going to dive into Daniel Warren Johnson's kick-ass pro wrestling comic book, Do a Powerbomb. I'd love to tell you I was hip enough to be into this from the day it hit the stands. I was not. I'm JT from Comic-Jutsu, and I will be your tour guide and referee for today. Of course, I am a long time fan of martial arts and pro wrestling. There's my Double or Nothing pin from the very first one, in case you don't know what kind of geek I am about it all. That's neither here nor there. Let's dive into this sumptuous comic brought to us by writer-artist Daniel Warren Johnson. The cover itself, you say I have two versions of it. There are a few different covers for this thing. Here, looking at this as a pro wrestling fan, this looks like it's late in a long, grueling 30-minute match or an Iron Man match. We see our wrestler dragging herself back up by the ropes. You can just feel the grit and the grime and the grease and power and the blood and the sweat and the tears of this. I mean, they're literal tears and redness in her bloodshot eyes and the sweat. And you can see the weight of her hand pulling down on the ropes. There's so much to enjoy just on this cover. And you can tell, if you're any kind of wrestling fan, that this book, that the creator, Daniel Warren Johnson, gets pro wrestling, that he understands the art, and more than that, he understands cartooning combat, as we like to talk about here on Comic-Jutsu. I would love to say I was into these from day one. I was not. My first exposure, very quickly, to Daniel Warren Johnson was his fan project, Old Man Luke, which honestly, I kind of hate all fan projects, but that was one that I looked at, and I'm looking down the bridge of my nose at it, like, how dare they make a fan comic of Luke Skywalker? And as I flipped the pages, I thought, you know what, this is pretty darn good. So here we go, introduction, using the classic comic book technique, now known as a trope, of using the television to bring you into the setting. You've got a kind of a tribute to Jim Ross here, JR. I have a long relationship with JR going all the way back, my friends, to Mid-South Wrestling. That's where he made his first appearance as an in-ring personality and interviewer. And it is advertising the ultimate championship match between Ua Steel Rose and Cobra Sun. Very quickly, we're going to suspend our disbelief, as one often does with certain types of stories, and whether they be comic books or film or pro wrestling, and we're going to pretend that the two toughest wrestlers in the world, one being a woman, one being a man, are going to have, an even match. But there's a reason that there are weight classes in wrestling, and why the main event of WrestleMania has not been Rhea Ripley versus Brock Lesnar. Okay, we'll just leave it at that. But for now, we'll say she has the grit, the determination, the skill, and the speed to allow her to match up with the power and raw brawn of Cobra Sun here. This is just a great introduction. I love the little accents that Daniel Warren Johnson does with the sound effects to just kind of put you into everything. Here she is putting on her in-ring gear and makeup, putting the championship belt into place, and the sound effect of pulling her cape on. And it's great. It adds a little extra piece of weight to it all. I love the sound effects here. The verses, it's literally electric, exploding off the page. He is such a phenomenal cartoonist, and honestly, he probably is my favorite current artist in the business today. Pretty much everything that he makes is worth picking up for his art alone, if not for more. This is a great little character building moment where we see Yua behind the scenes, building up her relationship with her family, with her husband, with her daughter, with her brother, aka Uncle Blood here. You see everything going on. Love the sound effects. The coloring in this is spectacular. It's not overpowering. There are enough accents to make the main figures pop out, but then there's also the accentuating of the mood through proper colors here. And here she is making her way out through the curtain. Love this. I love his shorthand for everything. I mean, he can go in and do details, but he also he understands cartooning, and he understands the various shorthand. He understands the language of it. He goes from having them stand on the ground in a room to here she's standing on the panel edge, to this overhead shot. Varies his angles expertly, comes out to the crowd. Wow, this is great. You have this the crowd here turning and cheering directly towards the reader into the camera as she comes running out through the crowd. And this is a great way to kind of capture the mood of that, of if you've ever entered a ring in front of a crowd, you get hit by that initial shock if they're going to cheer for you. And what better way to do it than you have someone right up here in the front? There is so much cartooning language just at use here, and nice use of shorthand. I mean, he could have painstakingly drawn in so many more elements, but he uses silhouettes, shadows, suggestions, the lights to accent it all. And here she is. You are Steel Rose. Streamers go off. That is a uniquely Japanese expression in pro wrestling, but you will also see it used in Mexico sometimes as homage to what they do in Japan, as well as in some American promotions such as Ring of Honor and occasionally AEW, which is my current favorite wrestling federation. And here she is being interviewed, and she talks about her motivations. This is just great character building. We are, a mere 4 or 5 pages into this, and already this just starts to just pull you in and suck you in. And, she says when she got started, the belt was her life. She wanted the glory, she wanted the fame. Then she became a mother. Now she doesn't fight for a belt, she fights for her family. I mean, this is such a powerful, poignant moment. I love the initials here. TGPW. It is what is it called? The Tokyo Grand Pro Wrestling, I believe, is what it stands for, which is probably an homage to IGPW. Although Daniel Warren Johnson says it in the letters page that he got into New Japan Pro Wrestling when he was initially inspired by this. And here you see them cheering for her. You. I love the way that the letters kind of that burst out and become these sound effects. She's just the best. The uncle there. And here we have our villain coming out. Cobra Sun. Boo, boo. You see the boos raining down, which if you're a proper villain, one should be booed. I love the way the dust and smoke is kicking up. There's kind of a smokiness to this arena that's actually more reminiscent to classic and vintage wrestling of like the 30s, 40s, and 50s, or even boxing when they boxed in small clubs that were just filled with smoke. And they called them smokers because of that. Here he says, "Cut my music." That is an MJF homage. So apparently Daniel Warren Johnson is a fan of MJF. Now, as this goes on, you might see me do some wrestling moves on Sasha if he jumps up here, because he is currently circling this comic book like a villain circling the ring. So this is all just great stuff. He does classic bad guy banter. Here you see the daughter. "Kick his ass, Mom." I'll censor myself because YouTube will shunt you out of the algorithm for any reason. Bing, bing. Hear a good sharp ringing of the bell. Nice sound effects lettering there. Cheer. This is a great just shorthand. Instead of it being rah or go or whatever, it's cheer. So the reader can interject their own whatever they're cheering her on. Again, the little sound effects, the kind of onomatopoeia effects as she pushes off with her foot, it just adds that little extra piece of weight. And here, this actually looks like a flying enziguri, the way she's jumping up and kicking around with her other leg here. Crack! Kicking him, Cobra Sun, here on the side of the head. Crack! The motion lines give it an added weight. The sound effect gives it a weight. The punch in gives it a weight. There's so much strong cartooning visual language at play here. It's phenomenal. It's a real feast for anyone that loves and appreciates cartooning. And if you're not a fan of pro wrestling, this comic book very possibly could draw you into it. Steel Rose with the upper hand. Cobra Sun makes a comeback with a brutal spinning elbow. Now, you can't tell he's spinning there, but because they say it, you can kind of you can imagine it in your head. You help fill that action in between the gutters. A bit of a tornado elbow to the midsection, as they might say. Wabak. Grabs her here. I'm immediately thinking Powerbomb. This is good storytelling, because this is very good structure and understanding of the technique and the maneuvers and the physics and weight of the bodies, because this is kind of the setup for a power bomb. But toss, love the sound effect, to the little emphasis here with the effect. Toss, throws her out over the barricade. I mean, that's quite a throw. At this point, this is starting to look like what would be called a squash match in pro wrestling. He gets up on the top rope. This is a pure Kota Ibushi, Kenny Omega type move. Does a sunset flip here out into the audience. Actually, there are probably several different names for some of these moves. Whoa! Oh my God! Crash! Just great chaos as he smashes down on top of her here in the middle of the crowd. Rolls her back into the ring. Good wet sound effect, woof, to emphasize, that she's been hurt and is, ready to be pinned, so to speak. So he takes her up for his finishing move. They tell you, the setting sun, which I'm not sure what kind of move it's actually supposed to be, but it's something off the top rope. And any kind of maneuver that happens off the top rope is dangerous and very deadly. So, it's an immediate cause for concern as he takes her up to the top rope. Now, in some instances, the babyface, the hero, or our champion in this case, might reverse this using a Frankensteiner or Hurricane Rana to counter this move and throw him off the top rope with her legs. But then something happens, and you see here his foot is wobbling on the top rope. Oh, slip. Love the color here. You get the idea. This is bad. It's red. Slip. Again, just great cartooning. And he even says no. And here, this is the first glimpse that you get of the behind the scenes of pro wrestling, the breaking of kayfabe, in that he didn't mean to do that. This is supposed to be a performance, even though there is athleticism and danger and skill and power and, brutality and all these things involved. It's not a mindless combat. It's not a mindless fight. It's not a street fight. It's not mixed martial arts. It is a coordinated choreography or dance of sorts. And she slips, does a full scorpion, which is horrible. Crack. You know, one has to assume right away, the neck is broken. And she lands, and you've got the Jim Ross character here saying, we've got an emergency stoppage, folks. Kid runs to the ring. I mean, this is all such great, just pathos and emotion. And it has so much weight to it. Then they cut down on the dialogue here and kind of let the view of the scene take over all over here. And then we get this mysterious foreshadowing of someone watching the event here and grinning at just the horror of this. And I love the old school, horrible, Randy Macho Man Savage shades here, or something you might have seen on Brutus the Barber Beefcake back during the rock and wrestling era. So you get an idea that this guy has been involved. If you understand, the language beyond comics, but the language of pro wrestling, that this guy has been a fan of or involved in the scene for quite some time. From the dated look there. Here we go, emergency room, and even this is so great. It's how little information can the storyteller provide that still tells you everything you need to know. Emergency room, instead of seeing the whole thing spelled out, or seeing a classic establishing shot of the hospital outside. It's just enough, and then you still have the weight of the family there in the waiting room. And then here's this little flashback of the daughter talking to her mother at some time in the past. Now, when I first read this, I thought, okay, well, this is later, she's retired or whatnot, which maybe was an intentional, fake out on his part. But then you learn that no, this is a flashback, and yep, she's gone. Silent moment, let that weight kind of settle in, and then boom, flash forward 10 years later, nice and simple. Well, bam, again, use of color, heavy sound effects, the thick saturated inks on the page to really get into the sweat and the feel and the kinetic energy of it all. Much smaller ring, smaller crowd here. You can tell this is an entirely different kind of setup. Simpler outfits. They're not as complicated or as baroque as what you saw on Cobra Sun and Steel Rose back here, as the daughter has grown up and now wants to be a wrestler as well in honor of her mother. She gets picked up, hit by they actually named the move here Falcon Arrow. Yep. Falcon Arrow, which I think was Kenny Omega's original finishing move. Maybe it was Kota Ibushi. I didn't watch as much of the Japanese pro wrestling, so I won't pretend to be an expert on it. I will watch it from time to time and whatnot, but it's hard to get a hold of and follow consistently in the States from time to time. But you can see, even though she may lack heart, she may lack power or skill, she has heart. Is that all you got? She's dripping blood here, standing up, showing her determination, her resolve. I love this. She does a bob and weave, slips under the punch, dodge. It could have also been bob and weave, but the dodge works just as well, to show that she ducks under. This is a nice little accent right here as she goes into what's called a crucifix position. Here you see understanding of if you get into grappling at all, you have to understand your various grips. So that's a C grip that you're seeing there. Cable grip is like this. And there are a variety of grips that could be used. But that is a C grip. That is the most common. And it's one that's easy to hold even if you're tired, because your fingers get pulled. But as long as your fingertips stay together, you can still maintain the hold. She grabs her on the other side, the crucifix there. This is actually a variation of close to what would be called a twister move, a kind of a cranking maneuver where pressure is applied into the neck area. Here they're calling it the Pillars of Golgotha. This is probably somebody's finishing move from some wrestling federation. That I don't know. In submission wrestling and jiu-jitsu, it's kind of a variation on the twister, although usually the legs would be tangled down here on the opposite side on the uke, the opponent's leg. We call them uke in Japanese submissions. So good stuff. She's holding her, but she does what can often happen if one is a smaller person grappling on top of a bigger person, is they can just slam you into the environment by climbing up on the top rope, jumping backwards. You see the jump here. The sound effects, again, they sell so much of this. Bam! Which knocks her out cold, which, even in a wrestling ring, that would knock you out cold in the streets or that kind of hard environment. It would probably shatter all of your ribs and put you into the hospital right away. 1, 2, 3. And she loses. Here we are backstage. You see the uncle telling her, here's your pay, Lona. Thanks for coming. She's basically what the kayfabe guys would call a jobber at this point, because the only way to get into the business is you've got to work your way up, and you're usually not a superstar overnight. You have to just do the job, and sometimes that means just being a jobber, but that's not always a bad thing. There is honor in being a great jobber. Just ask Rocky Maivia. Just ask the Mulkey brothers. If you don't know who those are, you can look them up. Here we see the uncle saying, he made a promise basically not to train her. We don't know at this point, was it to the mother? But then we find out in very short order, which is good. This is good storytelling, that it was the father who most likely said, don't let her get involved in this. She lost her mother, and we don't need the same to happen to her. Again, I love just the subtle use of colors throughout this to really emphasize the mood. And here, a very somber scene as she's heading out in this greasy alley. What do we have here? Kikuyabushi. I'm wondering if that's some kind of homage to something. I saw the Ibushi there, and I'm thinking Kota Ibushi, so it's probably a variation on his name. I love to see little homages like that. Great comic book story, great storytellers, period. That will just fill their work with so much of themselves and so much of the subject and of the thematic subject that it creates all of these, what we call now, Easter eggs or illusions. It makes things so much more enjoyable upon subsequent readings. And here we have the guy foreshadowed earlier who shows up just crackling with energy. So we know right away something's going on with him. We saw electricity around the bad guy earlier. Here's another bad guy with electricity around him. So right away you're thinking, okay, what is this guy? Is he a demon? Is he the devil? What is going on? And he says, yeah, I'm a necromancer. Welcome to my castle and home. He takes her to some kind of pocket dimension or some level of hell, if you will. He explains it right away. No need to wait. No need to mislead the audience. He's not the devil, unless that's a slight twist later. He straight up says, yeah, I'm a necromancer. I'm running a tournament. The belt isn't the only prize. I'd like to talk to you about bringing your mom back to life. Boom! And we end with this look on Loa's face. And this is great. This is great stuff. And then you have Daniel Warren Johnson here explaining his inspiration for what would become Do a Powerbomb. Here we have some fan art in the back, including a nice little piece by Chris Pierce here of Comic Tropes. She's doing the Bruce Lee maneuver, high kick to hit somebody in the head that is grabbing you, choking you from behind. Unfortunately, you have to have Bruce Lee's flexibility and skill and speed to do that, but hey, apparently she does. There you go. I love this so much. I've got to get some of this merch. I've got to find a t-shirt. So that's one of my goals. Daniel Warren Johnson has come to Heroes Con a few times, so I need to seek him out and see if he's got any of that sweet, sweet merch left. But wait, there's more. Just as an added bonus here, I thought we'd take a little peek at the art of Daniel Warren Johnson, as he's got a couple pieces in here. You see some character sketches and designs from the characters here from issue 1. And here he's doing some concept sketches of the artwork and the maneuvers. Here, this is that is a tombstone going on right there. That is probably a Falcon Arrow variation. There's a back suplex. So he's just tooling around with some of the maneuvers, making sure he's got the feel for how to do it. Here you see him playing with the character designs. And we see what Cobra Sun's possible inspiration was. Jushin Thunder Liger, one of the legends of the sport, just recently retired, and had a retirement tour here through the States, came through America as well. And here I'll leave you with this, one of the cover versions of issue 1 here, and you can just see his lush ink and line work, and some of the tricks that he uses here to create his fantastic artwork. All right, there you have it. And that is our return to the Comic Book Dojo. Thank you for joining us for this exploration. Once again, I'm JT. If you like this content, please like, subscribe, leave me a comment so I'll make more of it. Share it with your friends. The more you interact, the more that I will do for you. And I will do my best to be back soon with another fun look at some cool comic book stuff. Thank you for watching. Mate!